Hello, Youngstown Click, and welcome to another edition of Youngstown Click Be Connected podcast. I am so excited. Guys, you got to take a listen because I guarantee you're going to learn something from this podcast today. I am sitting here with Mary DeGenaro, who is running for judge, the 7th District Court of Appeals judge. Now, you may be like me and wonder, what in the world does that judge even do? But you're about to find out, and a whole lot more. First, I want to thank our sponsors, OhioFlame.com. They make custom-made fire pits, and it's like steel forged. They could customize it. It's pretty cool, lasts a lifetime, and they're made right here in Columbiana, Ohio. So check them out. I always say nothing brings people together, community together, quite like a fire pit. You know, everybody's cold. You gather around the fire, football season, all that stuff. So make sure you check them out. And then the Gallagher Building downtown, long-term units and Airbnbs. If you have family coming into town, or you just want to do a concert or an amphitheater night, the Dior Performing Arts Center, make it a whole night and book at the Airbnb at the Gallagher. You can find them on Facebook. Okay, so let's get right into this. And Mary, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what the Court of Appeals judge position does that you're running for.
Okay. Good to be with you, Debbie.
Thank you.
I am Mary DeGenaro, and I'm running for a seat I held for about 17 years, the 7th District Court of Appeals.
Okay.
The court serves 8 counties.
Okay.
The court sits in the largest county, which is Mahoning. So the court has a building in downtown Youngstown, beautiful building.
Nice. Okay.
So that's the biggest county. And then down along the river, I'm going to have to do it alphabetically. So the 8 counties that we serve are Belmont, Carroll, Columbiana, Harrison, Jefferson, Mahoning, Monroe, and Noble. So if the listeners could visualize the eastern side of the state, those 8 counties run along the Ohio River.
Yeah.
Monroe and Noble are the bottom 2 counties. So right across their county lines is Washington County and Marietta.
Got it. Okay.
One of the prettiest scenic rides in the state of Ohio. It's a beautiful part of the state, all 8 counties.
Okay. So the Court of Appeals, this is not like a courtroom that people come and state their case in front of you, right?
Correct. This is not... Ohio courts have 3 levels of courts.
Okay.
The first level is the trial court level.
Okay.
So your municipal courts, common pleas courts, domestic relations, probate. That is the level where judges and juries resolve disputes of facts between people. So, for example, if you have to go through a divorce or you are in an automobile collision, that gets litigated at that level. Criminal cases of all kinds. If you have a contract dispute between business partners, for example, that's where those kinds of disputes are resolved. Now, by and large, most cases are either settled or resolved at the trial court level through what lawyers and judges call motion practice, and the parties argue legal issues if there's no dispute of the facts and the cases are resolved that way. However, there are trials, either bench trials or a jury trial.
Okay.
So when a trial judge is presiding over a trial, I like to describe it to people that they're like the referees. I'm going to stick with football.
Okay,
it's
good.
Still,
yeah.
We're getting to the end of the exciting part of football season, right? All the bowl games, the Super Bowls right around the corner.
And it's crazy that this process, the judicial process, is so important, but to us, so many of us, it doesn't make sense. So thank you for taking the time to simplify it.
Sure.
Because we probably do understand football better than the judicial I don't know why I'm having trouble saying that judicial process.
Right.
And yet it's so much more important.
Right. The trial judge's role is similar to the referee, making sure both sides of the case are following the rules and present their cases. And, it's not that one side or the other is not being truthful. Think about how you go through your daily life. And 2 people can see the exact same thing, but because of their perspective, like if you witness an automobile collision and, one witness is on one side of the street and you're on the other, you're going to get a totally different perspective and view of that.
Okay.
So everybody gets an opportunity, following the rules, to present their evidence, to make their case to the judge or the jury. Okay. The trial judge will then give the jury instructions.
Okay.
And it's basically the law and all the legal issues that apply to how to resolve that particular case.
Got it.
And the trial judge tells the jury, okay, here are the criteria that you need to measure this case against. Here are the rules. Here is the law. And then you guys need to assess the facts. And based on that law, you decide how this case comes out. So, for example, who wins the contract dispute? Or in a criminal matter, has the state proven beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant has committed the crimes he or she is accused of?
Okay.
And then if so, you find them guilty.
Got it.
So the jurors have an incredibly huge responsibility. They are called the trier of facts. And when they're trying to decide a case, they use their everyday skills, common sense skills,
Okay.
as they watch the witnesses testify, as they look at the evidence that's presented, and who has presented a case where the facts make the most sense, who is telling the most believable story.
Got it.
They resolve the facts
Got
and
it.
decide a case.
Okay. Now, when that happens, the jury, does it have to be unanimous, a unanimous decision? The jury?
There's different rules
Okay,
for
depending on the
for different
cases.
kinds of
Okay.
cases. But,
Okay.
with criminal cases, must be unanimous. Okay.
Okay.
So once the case is done at the trial court level, jury has rendered a verdict.
Okay.
In Ohio, you have an automatic right to file an appeal to the Court of Appeals, and that is the bench I am seeking to return to.
Okay.
That court has a fundamentally different role.
Okay.
That court is only looking for errors of law. An appellate bench is not to decide, well, if I had been on the jury looking at all this evidence, I think I would have decided the other way.
Oh.
And here is why.
Okay.
Everybody think about a book they have read and then a movie that they have seen about the same book.
Yes. Okay.
You get a very different feel when you're watching the movie compared
Right.
to reading the book, right?
Yes.
Another analogy I like to explain to people is it's like watching a play, which is what it's like at the trial court level. You're watching the play
Yeah.
versus the Court of Appeals where you're just reading the script.
Yes.
Okay? Think about, so when you're watching a play or a movie, it's multi-layered, multi-sensory.
Right.
You see the people, how they move their bodies, their hand gestures, their eye gestures, the tone of their voice, how quickly do they speak? How quietly do they speak? All those things we rely on when we're trying to figure out who is being accurate,
Truthful.
who's being truthful, who's telling the most believable story.
Okay.
Okay. That's why juries are charged with resolving questions of fact, because how can you tell that? Like, for example, for all us moms and grandmas, okay, here's the difference between watching the play, watching the witness testify versus reading the script or the trial transcript
Okay.
at the Court of Appeals level. So you're puttering around the house and it's getting close to dinner time, and you tell your kids, okay, it's almost dinner time. Stay out of the cookie jar. No cookies until after dinner.
Okay.
So you're moving around the house, setting the table, starting to gather the family together. And one of the kids rolls into the table and they've got powdered sugar
Right.
all around their little lips.
That would have been me.
Okay. And mom asks the child, did you have a cookie? And the child, looks down, puts down their head, drops their eyes, and says, no, I didn't eat a cookie. What do you think mom thinks? Is that a pretty believable story?
No.
Okay. When you read the play script or the trial transcript at the Court of Appeals level, because everything that's said at trial is taken down by the court reporter, we all picture that, right?
Got it. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Because you can't sit there and watch the trial in real time. So
Right.
one of the things the Court of Appeals looks at is the transcript of the trial. So we read it.
Okay.
Well, just like a script,
Yeah.
just like a book. Question, did you eat the cookie? Answer, no. It's just plain old no.
Oh.
So how can you tell from just reading that, what we refer to as the cold record,
Okay.
from that transcript, from that play script, from that book, how can you evaluate, was the child being honest or accurate when telling their mother, no, I didn't eat the cookie?
Right.
When clearly the child did.
Right.
So that's why the Court of Appeals is limited to deciding errors of law.
Okay.
So basically, the Court of Appeals looks at the evidence that was presented at the trial court level. We would look at the law and say, okay, based on the proper reading of the law, at the trial court level, was the right decision reached based on the evidence?
Okay.
Now, if a case could have gone either way, you don't reverse for that.
Okay.
You don't send it back to the trial court because, again, it's that cold record.
Got
If
it.
the evidence is so evenly divided, like a classic example, an automobile collision, the only witnesses are the two drivers.
All right.
Let's say it's a intersection with 4 stop signs
Okay.
and the cars collide, okay?
Got it.
Somebody more than likely is at fault,
Right.
okay? Because it got all the way to trial.
Right.
But who do you believe? You've got 2 stories that could be equally plausible.
Okay. Right.
And so as long as the law is applied correctly, even it's like, hey, I read this transcript and I don't know that I believe driver A, I believe driver B. But we can't make that credibility call, that judgment of who's more believable
Okay.
because we didn't get to see
Yes. Okay.
the witnesses testify.
Okay.
Now, let's say, just to make the point, in that automobile collision scenario, let's say the trial court gave a jury instruction that said, and oh, by the way, if one of the drivers is driving a red car, people who drive red cars, they're flashy cars, they always drive fast. Under Ohio law, if you're in the red car and the evidence is close, the judgment goes against you.
Okay.
That's just making that supposition that because people who drive red cars will drive fast, that has no basis in law.
Okay.
And so if,
I see. So then
they
you could
say,
go, okay.
this jury instruction was erroneous because the trial court said, and hey, whoever is driving the red car, there's this propensity to drive fast. Okay, you can weigh that in evidence. And
Got it.
one car was red, one car was blue.
Right.
We're going to go with the guy that was
Erroneous.
because there's absolutely no basis in law that if you drive a red car, you're going to be
at
more
fault.
likely to cause a wreck, right?
Right. Okay.
So it's an simplified example.
Got it.
But to make the point.
Okay, that's fascinating. So what made you want to get into that? I mean, so you went to law school, obviously.
Right.
So why did you choose appellate? I mean, to me, that seems pretty tedious, pretty boring.
Okay, not an unfair perception.
Very necessary. Don't, yeah,
And it's very
respectful and
necessary,
necessary,
right.
yes.
So I'll answer that and then I'll explain why we have the appellate bench and
Okay.
all that stuff. So to a lot of people, it would seem dry. It would seem boring because it's often been described as a very monastic type of a court.
Okay.
Because the way we decide an appeal is once the trial is over, like I referred to earlier, if you believe that there was an error of law made in your case, you have an automatic right to appeal. Now, why
Yes.
is that in Ohio? Okay? Trial judges are pretty busy folks.
Okay.
They have to make the best judgment that they can
Okay.
in the moment.
Yes.
Picture, a trial judge. I talked about the ref on the field.
Yes.
Okay. Appellate judges are like the refs up in the booth. Okay. We get to
wow.
watch the instant replay. Okay.
Nice.
So we
Okay.
have, those referees, the appellate judge, because of the nature of what that court does, or what that referee up in the booth does, you have the time to
Got it.
look at that instant replay over and over and make the final call.
Nice.
Refs can't do that on the field.
Right.
The games will take days. Okay.
Right. Okay.
So too with the trial courts.
Oh,
okay.
that's good. Yeah.
They have so many more cases that
Okay.
they have to, give proper attention to and move along their docket. They can't take the time.
Right.
They have to, especially in a trial, you have to make instantaneous decisions. If a lawyer objects to a question, you can't well, let's take 10 minutes because I want to review the current,
Okay.
they have to make a judgment quickly, okay?
Uh-huh.
That's why human nature, sometimes mistakes can be made. So that's why we have the automatic right to appeal.
Nice.
The other way I describe the difference between a trial judge and an appellate judge is especially in the course of a trial.
Yeah.
Think of a trial also like a tennis match. Back, forth. The players react instantly. They're moving all over that court, trying to get to the ball wherever it hits.
Okay.
An appellate judge's job is like playing golf.
Okay.
It's like, okay, I'm about to tee off. The hole is so far. I got to get over all this stuff. For my first shot, I think I'm going to use my one driver.
Right. Okay.
Golfers, please don't judge. I'm trying. It's been decades since I ever golfed, and that's being generous calling it golfing. So it's like, so you have time to assess your shot, and you take your first shot, and then you move to, okay, what iron am I going to use now? Or am I going to use my wedge or whatever?
Yeah.
It's the nature of the game of golf.
Yeah.
You have the time to make the decisions, okay, to figure out what's the best, iron or club to use.
Right.
Or wood, whatever, okay?
Yeah.
So too with an appellate judge. What is the most appropriate law? What's the most current case law? What is the most applicable case to help ensure and evaluate if what the decision the trial court had to make in an instant?
Wow. This makes me appreciate our legal system a whole lot more, to know that these systems are put into place on behalf of the people, on behalf of the upholding the law, so that there's that accountability factor. There's so many countries I hear about, that's just, hey, who you bribe or who and that type of thing. So even hearing this is helping me to understand and also appreciate. And I feel like those two things are linked. Understanding and appreciation are definitely linked.
It's a beautiful system.
Yeah.
And the court system was in play. We inherited the British tradition of courts.
Okay.
However, the extra special thing about the court system in the United States, and it started with those colonies and then those states before we became a nation.
Okay.
For many years, the courts were under the king. Okay.
Right.
In the United States and in all 50 states, we've got those three branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial.
Yeah.
So back over in jolly old England, executive was the king.
Got it.
Okay. But many of the courts were under the control and auspices of the king. So you really only had kind of two branches of government. You had Parliament, and then you had the king and his courts.
Okay.
Whereas in the United States, we have three.
And they're separate.
They're separate. The legislative branch, Ohio's General Assembly, makes the law.
Okay.
The executive branch, like the governor, like the attorney general, like your chief of police, they're, broadly speaking, that's the executive branch because they enforce the law.
Got it.
The judiciary just interprets the law.
I like it. Okay.
And when you separate the government's powers, that protects the people.
Right. And I remember learning about this, but it seems so far off from, it was a textbook. Separation of that power is so good because it is dangerous when it falls into, I know it hit the news that one of the presidents in the, past few years, there was a celebrity that just loved him so much. And she said, wouldn't it be great if he just had all the power to do whatever he wanted to do without people stopping him? And there was a big uproar because of how uneducated that thought was,
So here's an interesting perspective. Mm-hmm. If you asked most citizens, and to be honest, some lawyers too, especially, depending on the nature of their practice. But if you ask somebody to instantaneously answer, what do you think protects our individual rights and freedom? What would you say, Debbie? Real quick, you can't think about it long.
Okay.
What protects our rights?
The Constitution.
A little more specific.
The laws.
Okay. All right, I'll give you credit. Okay. Most people would say the Bill of Rights because everybody thinks our freedom of speech, our freedom of religion, our right to assemble, petition our government, right to a jury, protection from unreasonable search and seizures.
Right.
They do offer some protections, but what truly protects our freedom, and to your earlier comment about one person having too much power,
Yeah.
okay, like the king, because the judges were like kind of sort of doing his bidding back in the day.
Right.
And some of the chick king queens too, like Queen Elizabeth I, she was a strong leader, so it's not just the gentlemen,
Right.
kings and queens. It is the separation of powers, and you were getting to it. The late Justice Antonin Scalia would routinely talk about that's what protects our individual freedoms, is that separation of power.
Wow.
The Soviet Union had a heck of a constitution back in the day.
Really?
It had all kinds of wonderful rights and privileges and things like that. Do you think the Constitution of the Soviet Union protected the citizens of the Soviet Union like our Constitution protects us?
No.
And why do you think? Because, and you intuitively know it, because that story you told about the celebrity and the president. It's about power being divided.
Wow.
And that concept of checks and balances. So that Soviet Constitution wasn't worth the paper it was printed on, because you know why? There wasn't a separate independent judiciary to protect Soviet citizens' rights.
Wow.
When the executive branch, the government,
when
was
it didn't work for them. Yeah.
didn't work for them and was infringing on their natural rights as human beings. That's why there's a lot of, nations around the world, that supposedly have constitutions, but without that separation of power, where you divide up the power of government and have a place, the courts are there to protect the people, and they all have their different roles. Like if the General Assembly passes a law that's unconstitutional, the governor could be the first protection. He or she could veto that law. It's like, you know what? This law is saying that only Cleveland Browns fans can vote in Ohio.
Right.
Okay. I think the folks down in Cincinnati would have a little bit of problem with that.
Right.
And again, I'm picking a
football analogy and
a ridiculous example to make the point. If the governor's like, yes, that is clearly unconstitutional, I'm going to veto it.
Right.
Let's say the General Assembly decides that they are able to override the governor's veto.
Okay.
Then you've got the court.
And
somebody brings a challenge to the courts and says, this law is unconstitutional, and here's why.
Wow.
And then the law is defeated that way.
Wow.
So see how the different branches...
It's so necessary.
And here's another thing, like, let's say we all know that there's speeding limits, right?
Uh-huh.
Well, let's say the State Highway Patrol had a policy that like, okay, if we see you're a Cincinnati Bengals fan or you're from Cincinnati and we see you speeding, we're going to give you a pass. But if you're a Browns fan, we're going to get you.
Right.
We're going to get you. And, litigating something like that would be a lot more complicated. But that's an area where the executive is doing something unconstitutional.
Okay.
So then the people would have recourse to go to the courts.
Wow. That's incredible. And really, you're
So that's the beauty of it. That's the
Yeah.
beauty of it. And if a court, here's an example from history, a shameful part of our nation's history, but it is what it is. Plessy versus Ferguson, hundreds of years ago, said that separate but equal was constitutional. There was one dissent, thank heaven, the great dissenter. But guess what happened? We fought a civil war. And then the 13th, 12th, 13th, and 14th, 15th, those the Civil War amendments were passed.
Okay.
One of which outlawed slavery. Okay. So when the U.S. Supreme Court issued that bad decision in Plessy versus Ferguson, it was the legislative branch, Congress, who fixed that. Because all those Civil War constitutional amendments were crafted in Congress. They went out to the states. They were ratified by enough states. And that built the basis to start making the legal arguments that separate but equal was illegal. Fast forwarding to giants like Thurgood Marshall, who was a lead counsel for the NAACP and litigated Brown versus Board of Education. That was the nail in the coffin, started all the way back by Congress in the post-Civil War era with those civil Civil War amendments
Wow.
that separate but equal was illegal.
Got it.
And then that great litigator, Thurgood Marshall, was the first African American on the U.S. Supreme Court.
Wow.
And presently, we now have 2 African Americans serving on the U.S. Supreme Court.
Yeah, and there's only
So how amazing. 9 justices.
Yeah, wow.
And for those of you who are counting noses, 4 women.
Right.
And we just lost within earlier this month, Sandra Day O'Connor, the first woman appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Really?
In 1981.
She was the first woman?
She was the first. And unfortunately, I don't recall off the top of my head how many years later before Ruth Bader Ginsburg became the second woman.
Wow.
And then, oh golly, I can't remember if Sonia Sotomayor was before Elena Kagan, but it's kind of...
You know what I love too is the opportunity that it seems like the process is thorough. It's not like, some jobs they have to hire people because they are a woman or they need a certain number. I don't think it's like that with the Supreme Court. I think that they just have the equal opportunity to apply to be a Supreme
they're
Court
selected,
judge,
because
right?
they're selected by the president.
Right, okay, yeah.
And those are,
So,
regardless of what you think of their judicial philosophy, those are all
very experienced.
accomplished people
Right.
that
It's
have a serious job.
fascinating to see the process before they could get onto the board, before they become a justice, how much of a process they have to stand up against. Because that's kind of like the highest law in the land, right? The Supreme Court. So you definitely want those to be like
The U.S.
the
Supreme
top.
Court is the top court in the nation and has the final word on what the federal Constitution has to say.
Wow.
In each state, their respective Supreme Court has the last word. So the Ohio Supreme Court that I had the privilege to serve on for 11 months in 2018 has the final word on Ohio's Constitution.
Got it. Okay, so real quick, before we go into, I want to talk about your tenure. You said you served 14 years and now you're rerunning. I want to talk about that, but real quick, can you quickly touch on the Constitution? Because there seems to be a lot of, right now, the Constitution is thrown around. There's a dialogue that says it's outdated, like the Constitution could just be done away with and redone because we're in the 20th century or 20, Can you touch on that a little bit before we go back into kind of your specific career?
My view, and I believe the view of most judges, most lawyers, those principles contained in the Constitution are timeless and they transcend time.
Amazing.
I like to explain to people that the Declaration of Independence is the why we are Americans and why this country was founded and what our ideals are.
Okay.
And the Constitution is the document that tells us how we're going to do it and how we're going to protect our fundamental rights. Because think about all those beautiful words in the Declaration of Independence. And I wish I had it handy because I would be able to quote it better.
Right.
But, when in the course of human events, the thing
It
about
becomes necessary
for people to break the bonds with their government.
Yeah.
But there's those beautiful words, and it was a committee. Thomas Jefferson was the chief drafter, but also on that committee was John Adams and Benjamin Franklin, and I can't remember founder that helped, was the committee to draft the Constitution.
Hancock or no?
No, he was the president of the Congress, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, but those beautiful words that we are endowed by our Creator, certain inalienable rights, and that is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And you see throughout the document of the Declaration of Independence reference to natural law and nature and nature's God and nature's rights. So when you talk about God and nature's God and the Creator, that is that being, that most religions relate to. The 3 Abrahamic faiths all have that common theology of a singular deity, And it's those principles that talk about natural rights, to practice your religion, to petition your government. Those things are innate in us as human beings by the very fact that we are human beings. And we got that from our Creator.
Yeah.
Not from a government. And every human being across the globe were born with those inalienable human rights, those natural rights.
Right.
We were born with that. And that held true at our nation's founding.
Yeah.
During the time of the Roman Empire to today. And, generations from now. That's timeless.
Right. We just so happen to be blessed enough to be in a country that recognizes those rights because, like you said, no matter where you are in the world, people have those rights, but not every government recognizes those rights for the people.
And to protect those
And
rights.
to protect them.
And
right.
to understand that that is their role, that government is to serve the people. The people is not to serve the government.
Wow.
So that is my answer, that the Constitution doesn't need to be chucked away.
No, right.
It is a timeless document crafted by some really smart people.
Mm-hmm.
Were they perfect? No. But are we perfect? No. And generations that follow us and look back at us, they're going to see our flaws as well. But,
right.
But as Americans, I still cling to the feeling and the belief that those inalienable rights, those fundamental principles of individual rights and freedom, and when people come to live together, they want to do so respectfully.
Yes.
And they form communities.
Right.
And, everybody live together with a sense of order.
Right.
And that there are rules.
Right.
So we can all, live happy, productive lives. And I still think that is just so deeply ingrained in Americans.
Right.
Do we squabble amongst ourselves? Sure.
I don't feel like there's any entity right now in politics or in even just around that is unselfish enough to form and again, this is not my belief. This is, I guess, my answer to the people who think that the Constitution is outdated or needs updated. I think for people to realize how much sacrifice was involved in the formation of the Constitution, how much sacrifice was involved personally for the people who put together this document to last for generations beyond them. I feel like now we live in such a selfish culture that people would be forming it based on their selfish whims or how much money they could make or their, to try to build their family name. When people who were part of building the Constitution, they gave up fortunes. Whole families, yes. They could have been selfish, been wealthy, but they did this for the formation of something that they knew would live on. Here nowadays, if we were to form something, it would be it would be so dangerous to entrust in the hands of people. Say they don't trust their government. They say, oh, we can't trust the politicians. We can't trust the government. And then in the same breath, say, oh, we need to trust them to create something, basically replace something that has been created by selfless and really sacrificial people, I
understand your point. Call me a cockeyed optimist, and we just watched South Pacific recently, so I'm thinking about Nellie Forbush.
Yes.
Well, I'm dating myself, but when the Declaration of Independence was signed, towards the end of the document, it says, we pledge to each other our lives, our fortune, and our sacred honor. Wow. Every man that put their name on that document was signing their own death sentence. They were thumbing their nose at Britain. They were perceived to be traitors by the king in Great Britain.
Yeah.
To your point about their commitment. And the men and women, because women supported the Civil War that fought and saved our nation.
Yeah.
Saved our nation. The Civil War, and that type of commitment of families and men and women. Every man and woman that serves in our military in this country, around the globe, who serve police and fire and sheriff's departments, and their families make huge sacrifices. Police, fire, sheriff, highway patrol.
Yeah.
Those men and women go to work every day and their family is like, are they going to come home tonight or after their shift? Folks that serve in the military, they go on tour for, 9 months, a year, come home for 4 weeks and go back again.
Yeah.
They're making huge sacrifices for all of us. Their families are making huge sacrifices for all of us. That is why I like to believe that I understand what you're saying, and we're, generously speaking, having kind of a toddler moment the last decades or so in this state, in this country.
That's an interesting analogy. Yeah. Okay.
It's where I am right now. I've got a couple of toddlers in my life that are pretty awesome. We need to get back to civil discourse, to understanding that, democracy, and remember, we are a representative democracy. We're a republic. We are not a pure democracy because those, are
that's mob
unfeasible.
Rule, right? Democracy would be.
I'm going to stay neutral and say hugely unworkable. Okay?
Okay.
We need to be more civil. with
Okay.
each other.
Yeah.
We have forgotten that we can disagree without being disagreeable. And people may think that's unrealistic, idealistic. I beg to differ. And as I go through my life and my daily routine, even, before when I was on the bench and now since I'm not, and you talk to people and you hear, oh, these politicians, they don't get along, they don't compromise. I'm like, well, how is your office holder doing? If that is important to you, we all have our principles, and there's two sides to every story.
Yeah.
But there's certainly a way to have compromise.
Yeah.
If we didn't know how to compromise, we wouldn't have a country.
Right.
Okay? Is that what you're expecting of your elected officials?
Right.
Okay. Are you, as you live your daily life, demonstrating, civility and kindness and being open to hearing somebody else's perspective, disagreeing agreeably?
Right.
But when we shift things to personal as opposed to substantive conversation and debate and discussion about the very many important issues that faces our county, our state, our nation, and the world, we need to do a better job living up to the ideals that are expressed in those founding documents, like the beginning of the Constitution. We the people. It's not them guys in Columbus or them gals down in Washington, D.C. It's we the people.
Yeah.
In order to form a more perfect union.
Wow. Yeah.
More perfect.
Yeah.
We're all humans. We're all flawed. We're never going to get perfect.
Right.
But-
And I love that because you're right. They're representatives of we the people, and we can support them to be the best representatives, and we could make our voice heard. But I think so many people, the we the people, have been made to feel powerless while blaming and pointing fingers at the people, at the representatives. And so, that's thank you for sharing that. So let's talk about you. So you spent 14 years in this appeals court.
17.
17 years.
And
Oh
then
my
I
goodness.
spent almost a year on the Ohio Supreme Court.
Oh, wow. Okay. So now what did you just take a break and now you're getting back into it? Or like, how did you, or what's making you decide to jump back in? Because I know that, you could.
So had been elected 3 times to the Court of Appeals.
Okay.
First race was in 2000, then 2006 and 2012.
Okay.
2017, I was approached by some folks from the Ohio Republican Party
Okay.
saying, hey, would you be interested in running for the Ohio Supreme Court? We need you. And I had explored that a couple years prior.
Okay.
Didn't get the party's endorsement, so I didn't run because
Okay.
that's the way
Yeah. Kind of
we
get
function.
endorsed.
Right,
Mhm.
right. So I thought about it, talked about it with my family. It's like, okay, it's either I run for the Ohio Supreme Court or run for the Court of Appeals in 2018.
Okay.
So I made the choice. And then there was an opening on the court, and that kind of solidified it for me.
Okay.
So I was appointed to fill out a vacancy on the Ohio Supreme Court. So I served on that court for 11 months.
Wow.
Unfortunately, in 2018, I did not win the election.
Okay.
So I lost the seat. Since that time, I have been serving as the chief legal counsel for Auditor of State Keith Faber,
Okay.
our state auditor. What does that mean? I'm on his executive staff, part of
Okay.
his leadership team, and I lead his legal staff. So I work with a great executive staff team under the auditor. I have a wonderful legal team that I work with. And what we do is we serve as the in-house counsel for the auditor's office. It's a statewide agency that audits from the state all the way to the smallest, city, village, and township to ensure that public dollars are spent lawfully.
Got it. Okay.
So we have auditors scattered around the state. And a lot of the things that they do, they're making sure that the money's being spent lawfully.
Okay.
So they need advice and guidance from the lawyers
Got it.
explaining, giving them advice as they go and do these audits.
Okay.
Also, other classic in-house counsel responsibilities like reviewing and drafting contracts, supporting HR when they need our help,
Okay.
doing internal training on legal issues for the agency, helping write with a team of audit professionals handbooks and audit materials that our auditors use and our clients use, so they
Right.
see what we're going to audit and how and
Okay.
and things like so. A lot of resources
Wow.
that our auditors use, and then people who we audit
Right.
use. We do public speaking. We also provide what's called certified public records training, which teaches government officials how to properly manage their public records and how to properly respond to public records requests, and also how to appropriately conduct meetings under the Ohio Open Meetings Act. So it's a very interesting, very fast-paced type of job. Like we talked about earlier when I was, almost between the two courts.
Yeah.
Almost 18 years an appellate judge. That's a much more quiet
Right.
type of bench, because the way an appeal works is once the trial is done, the party who typically lost at the trial court level believes that a legal error or errors have been made that affected the outcome of the case. They appeal it.
Okay.
They write a brief. They are called the appellant because they are appealing to the court.
Got it. Okay.
So they write a brief, which is like a term paper that lays out the legal mistake or the mistakes that were made,
Okay.
what the legal mistakes were, and why they were a mistake.
Got it.
And this is what you need to do to fix it, like send it back for a new trial or reduce the amount of judgment I got or any other kind of remedies.
Okay.
Now, the side who won, they are called the appellee.
Okay.
And they write a brief, which is like a term paper, saying the other side's wrong. This is why what happened at the trial court was correct.
Okay.
Affirm the trial court.
Okay.
Then the records, so then those briefs, the record, the trial transcript, all the evidence goes to the Court of Appeals.
Okay.
3 judges at trial court, 1 judge or a jury.
Uh-huh.
Trial or at the Court of Appeals, 3 judges in Ohio decide every case, randomly drawn.
Okay.
At the 7th district, so they have staff attorneys, which are licensed attorneys that help the judges do their work.
Okay.
They read the briefs, they review the records, they prepare what's called a bench memo.
Wow.
Just kind of, making sure that the parties have laid out the law accurately, that it's current, because the law sometimes can change fairly quickly through other case decisions.
Okay.
And maybe they have missed a critical fact or a number of facts, or they didn't fully develop the legal argument. So they write this bench memo.
Okay.
Then the 3 judges assigned to the case have the bench memo, the parties' briefs. Most of the cases are decided by reading the parties' briefs, but there's also something that's called oral argument.
Okay.
Both sides get 15 minutes, and it's kind of like a conversation like we're having.
Okay.
The appellant gets to go first,
Okay.
and they get the first word and last word. So they divide their 15 minutes up however they want.
Got it.
So they go to the podium, they start their presentation to the court. This is why I think it's an error. And pretty quickly, the judges start asking questions. So it's a back and forth between the judges and the lawyers.
Wow.
Questions.
Okay.
Appellant sits down. The appellee gets up, starts their presentation. That back and forth questions from the bench and the lawyer go for 15 minutes.
Okay.
They sit down. And then however many minutes the appellant left,
Okay.
and they typically leave 3 to 5 minutes.
Okay.
Because say, so they get the last word. Well, I disagree with what he said because blah, blah, blah. And then there's back and forth. Then the case is done. So then the judges go into a conference room and discuss the cases that were set for that day.
Okay.
For oral argument, as well as others that were just being decided on the briefs or the term paper.
Okay.
They're discussed, they have a vote, and then by random assignment to keep the workload even, one of the 3 judges are assigned to write the opinion.
Okay.
Which is, again, like a term paper, and it lays out the facts of the case and everything.
Wow.
Here are the errors that were alleged. And more often than not, cases are affirmed on appeal.
Okay.
But the opinion will explain, here are the errors that were alleged.
Okay.
And here's why either what happened at the trial court level was right or wrong.
Right.
And then, and that's how the case is done. You can try to get the Ohio Supreme Court to take your case. but it's very difficult.
Okay.
Okay. The role of the Court of Appeals is we're called a court of error correction. Our job is to make sure the law is applied correctly
Okay.
throughout the district.
Okay.
The Ohio Supreme Court is not a court of corrections.
Oh.
You have to persuade the Ohio Supreme Court that your case doesn't just affect you, because most cases just involve the litigants, right?
Yes. Okay.
You have to say, I want you to take my case, Ohio Supreme Court, because the issue that I think the Court of Appeals was wrong on doesn't just affect my case, but it would affect the whole state of Ohio.
Okay, that makes sense.
So an example of that is interpreting a provision of the Ohio Constitution.
Okay.
And maybe there's a nuance that hasn't been addressed yet. So the court could take that.
Okay.
Something that was very hot in the 7th District when I was there and then percolated up to the Ohio Supreme Court was way back in the day when the oil and gas was really hot and first came to Ohio. There was a lot of open, unanswered legal questions.
Okay.
And so our court, we dealt with a lot of those issues, and I kind of developed an expertise in that. And then some of those issues went up to the Ohio Supreme Court.
Okay.
It would have an impact on
absolutely.
Ohio, not the whole state,
Right.
but there were some legal principles involved that had its genesis in oil and gas, but would have.
Okay.
So that would be
Interesting.
something the Supreme Court would take.
Okay.
The Ohio Supreme Court automatically takes every death penalty case now. It goes from the common pleas county level straight to the Ohio Supreme Court. In the early 90s, they took the Court of Appeals out of the death penalty loop or process
Okay.
to try to have it be a little more expedited. Now this is kind of niche-y, nerdy legal process.
Okay.
In criminal cases, and particularly death penalty cases, there's a post-conviction petition process. So after you go through your trial and you go up to the Ohio Supreme Court and they affirm your death sentence and your conviction, then there's this whole separate, again, it's kind of law for legal nerds, post-conviction appeal process.
Okay.
And the Court of Appeals is involved in that in death penalty cases, but that's pretty rare. But anyway, so that's basically how things flow.
Wow.
All the way up to the Ohio Supreme Court and down. So that's how the Intermediate Court of Appeals in Ohio works.
Amazing.
And pretty much, each district may have their own slight different process is how they manage their docket and have schedule hearings and everything, but it's all the same work. You look at the record, you read the parties' briefs, if they have oral argument, and then the court issues an opinion. So that's
Got it.
So that's a lot of reading.
Yeah.
And you don't get to see, you see your judicial colleagues and the staff attorneys
Right.
all the time, but
You're not
because of the nature of the work, courts of appeals don't have nearly the number of court sessions that trial courts do. And trial judges don't have trials. They have pre-trials with the parties.
Okay.
Or just the parties' lawyers, to make sure the cases are moving along.
Got it.
They could have motion hearings,
Okay.
let alone trials. So the trial courts interact with the public and the lawyers with a lot more frequency than the Court of Appeals does, because it's the nature of their very discrete, separate types of work.
And
their
it totally
role.
makes sense. Like you said, the people up at the top rewinding the play, looking at the play.
Yeah.
That you don't really see on the field or
Right.
anything. That makes sense. So when is the election that you are running? When is
This March. So
this March? Okay.
the filing deadline was the 20th.
Okay. Just a couple days ago.
Right.
Yesterday.
So there will be a contested primary, myself, and I have an opponent.
Okay.
In the Republican primary. Okay. No Democrats filed to run, so whoever wins the primary will be unopposed for the general election.
Got it. Okay. So the primary is in March?
March 19, yes.
Okay.
Because the judge that currently holds the seat is going to be stepping down after the first of the year, taking another position in public service.
Okay. Okay. Awesome.
So we got kind of sidetracked by, what the auditor state, what I do at the auditor state and the Court of Appeals.
Right. No, but I find it all fascinating. I feel like
So that's why, but I missed the bench. It's been a wonderful, and I continue to have a very good experience at the state auditor's office. But I love the bench because I love the work, and it gave me the opportunity to do things like this, to talk to the public about their courts, to demystify. Like electricity freaks me out. So I appreciate, the skill of an electrician because, I don't want to blow up my house, or, a guy that, knows how to work on gas fireplaces. I would be petrified. I'd blow up my house. So things you're not familiar with kind of makes you a little bit nervous.
Right.
So it's nice to have people that can demystify things for you, that can explain it. Like, what you see on TV isn't necessarily accurate.
Right.
So one of the things I love the most and look forward to doing again is the court would have sessions at high schools, because we serve 8 counties.
Okay.
But we would go to the counties that the cases are from, so the lawyers didn't have to schlep up to Youngstown from, a couple hours away all the way down Monroe. So we would travel like the old circuit riders, like Abraham Lincoln, right?
That's pretty cool, right?
We would go to the county courthouses of each county.
Okay.
So many times a year, depending upon the number of cases from that
each
county, and hear them there.
Wow. That's
so
really
you stay
cool.
connected with the people in those counties.
In their space,
Yeah. And beautiful courthouses. It's a beautiful ride. And then we would do that and visit high schools throughout the district.
That is cool. Kind of
So
like...
it's, like being a teacher.
Wow.
And it's a great program because our staff attorneys, the court staff attorneys, would go ahead of time. We would try to find interesting cases that appropriate cases for high school students, and things that they should hear. So our first go-to would always be to find like DUI cases, because you want to reinforce that don't drinking and driving when you're in high school. Like, how they always have those wrecked cars at prom time.
Yeah.
So important. Or like some drug cases, because you want to send that message.
Right.
This is what messing around with drugs can get you into. So we try to find things that they would find interesting and would be appropriate. Mm-hmm. So the attorneys would go explain, like we've been doing today, here's how your court system works, here's what the Court of Appeals does, and then gives them some background on the cases that they're going to hear.
Okay.
So then we'd go to the high schools. And the lawyers are great. They, they very willingly are willing to go to the high schools and argue these cases. They'll often stick around and talk with the students.
Wow.
It's just a wonderful collaborative way to support education and to educate the next generation of citizens. And these students, every high school we visited, no matter where, those kids were engaged. They were paying attention. And then when the cases were over, they were asking such interesting, thoughtful questions. And it was like, God, it's just like, this is the Valley's a great place.
Yes.
This part of the state's a great place. This is our future. And it was just so gratifying to see these kids and how they enjoy it. Because, I remember my days in high school, like,
Right.
Assemblies, yawn, right?
Right. But man, there are so many adults that don't vote. If you try to talk anything about politics, I have a friend who always says, "Oh, that's decided by people way above our pay grade." So he hands off pretty much anything because he feels like it's out of his control. So to bring that into high school, where these high schoolers now understand and are connected to that process, that's really cool. Yeah. I would have loved that in high school.
And the other fun thing that I look forward to doing again, Youngstown State has a moot court team. Oh. And they would compete at regional and national competitions every year. And so the court would put them through their paces. We would help them practice.
Wow.
So, also helping, the next future generation of lawyers.
Yeah.
And I can think of a few students that were on, past YSU moot court teams that are now lawyers. I can think of one young guy, he's like a third son to me.
Aww.
Got into public service, working, being a regional liaison and a staff member, most recently for Senator Portman.
Okay.
So it's interesting how you can help the next generation on their professional journey.
Absolutely. I didn't even know YSU had a law.
They've got you can do a pre-law.
A pre-law, okay.
Pre-law degree. The nature of our court, we don't get to see people as much.
Right.
So we love to have these opportunities, and that's why I would always make myself available to speak to Rotary clubs and Kiwanis clubs
Absolutely.
and whoever to
Yeah.
educate them about their courts and say, you know,
Right.
that craziness you see on TV. No,
Not
judges
it.
don't yell and are rude to people like you see
Right.
Judge Judy and all those
Yeah.
other shows. You know,
Have an attitude.
unlike
and,
unlike Judge kind, wise Judge Wapner. I'm really dating myself now. And like the TV shows, okay?
Yeah.
It's serious work in the courts, from the citizens who sits on juries to the lawyers to the judges. And it may, even a trial may seem a little dry and boring because, again, talking about the rules, and the trial judge's job is to make sure that the trial proceeds because
Right.
everybody's got a burden of proof. And you
Right.
got to do it right and you got to do it orderly. So it's not as exciting and dramatic
Right.
as it is on TV. So... And have we seen disturbing things on the news? Sure.
Right.
But by and large, day in and day out, dignity and justice is being done in our courtrooms
Right.
in the valley, across the 7th District in the state.
Right.
And one of the key components of that are the citizens who accept their responsibility and step up to do their duty and serve on a jury. Cannot
I know.
stress enough the importance.
I know. Talking to you previously, I know what a passion this is of yours, jury duty.
Yes.
Which nobody really, I've never heard anybody really respond to it in a positive way. So, yeah, tell us about why jury duty is a good thing.
So let's flash back to our when we talked earlier about separation of powers, and you got to separate that. Okay. One of the biggest checks two of the biggest checks we have as citizens on our government of any level is our vote and jury duty. The vote, believe it or not, as I've, served at the statewide level, either as an office holder or, in my current role.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Not every cycle, but it does happen, including, I wish I could remember, I remember hearing it happened in Mahoning County however many years ago. Guess what? Every vote does count. Because it does happen where you do the initial vote, you do the recount, and it's a tie. And you know how they break that tie?
How? One
Coin
vote?
toss.
Are you serious?
Yeah, so do not
Wow.
ever say my one vote doesn't count. It's very important.
Yes, absolutely.
Very important.
And people would be shocked. I was shocked at how, when there is a winner, how few votes make that winner, even when it's not a tie. When you look at the difference in some of these races, it's not a whole lot.
I think 2 years ago, I don't know where it was in the district, but a county commissioner's race came down to like somewhere between 100 and 150 votes, a countywide race.
Wow.
A former colleague of mine on the Supreme Court won his first race for the Ohio Supreme Court. Now that's a statewide race.
Okay.
By about 16,000 votes.
Wow.
That's
Statewide.
pretty darn close.
Yeah, for the whole
So
state.
don't tell me one vote doesn't matter. It sure as heck does. The other important check is jury duty. When I was a lawyer, and again, most cases don't go to trial, but depending on your practice, like especially if you're a litigation specialist in a big firm, you're in court doing trials a lot. But for most lawyers in the Valley, you're a litigator, but it's not like you've got a trial every month. It just the system would come to a screeching halt if you didn't settle cases. And sometimes most cases are settled civil stuff before a lawsuit's ever filed.
Right.
You have a whole bunch that gets settled before you get too much deeper into it than the complaint and the answer is filed. A lot of cases are disposed of, like we talked before, on motions to dismiss or summary judgment. And those are, there's really no dispute of material fact. It's a legal decision.
Right.
Because otherwise, if you had to try everything, it would come to a screeching halt. But when there's a jury, and I had a handful of trials before I went on the bench, I pretty much did appellate work as a lawyer. And when you watch a jury being seated, and then when they're picked, and the judge is reading them their oath, and they're taking an oath, and when you're a juror, you are now a constitutional officer.
Wow.
When you take an oath as a juror, it's beautiful. It's so amazing to watch. And maybe if more people saw it,
Yeah.
They would be more jazzed up about jury duty. But when you watch those jurors take that oath and you just see something pass over them and they understand the responsibility they have.
Wow.
They are charged with deciding a dispute, a contract dispute
Yeah.
between people, or a property dispute, or an automobile collision, or a malpractice case,
Right.
or a criminal matter, whether the defendant is going to go to prison.
That's crazy.
That's a pretty, that people take that very seriously. So,
Right.
and especially with criminal settings, the government, it's a very heavy burden beyond
Yeah.
a reasonable doubt. So imagine picture yourself standing with your arms outstretched.
Mm-hmm.
What does beyond a reasonable doubt mean? It means like dropping one hand all the way down to your knees and the other one up above your head.
Wow.
That's how heavy the weight must be. The burden of proof is on the government to prove that you've committed a crime.
Wow.
Because your liberty is at risk, right?
You're right. Yeah.
Now, like with civil matters, there's varying degrees of, clear and convincing, a preponderance of the evidence. So again, put your hands to your sides like
Yeah.
you're a scale. Preponderance of the evidence, you just got to tip the scales a wee bit one way or the other. Okay. And that's your burden of proof for a class of cases. And then clear and convincing evidence, put your arms out again, and it's got to be a little bit heavier. It's got to be a little,
Okay.
maybe down to your waist or something.
Got it.
Okay.
But beyond
your
a
burden of
reasonable
proof.
doubt is up and pretty much done.
Boom.
Like,
yeah.
all
I
or
mean,
nothing.
that,
Wow.
and again, because you face the risk of incarceration,
Yeah.
your liberty is going to be impacted. So jurors take that very seriously. And I can't think of a more awesome power of government than to lock you away in a penitentiary. That's why doing jury duty is so important.
You're right. Even right now, as you're talking, I think about, to this day, people have an opinion about whether OJ was guilty or innocent. But really, all the opinions in the world didn't matter. What the lawyers wanted or didn't want didn't matter. It came down to the people on the jury, which is how many people? 12?
I believe
people?
so, yep.
12 people. So 12 people of all the millions of people with an opinion, it was in the hands of 12
It was
people.
their,
That is, wow.
It was their
scary.
It
and
was their
necessary.
judgment. Their judgment. They took an oath.
Man.
So, and I think if we would talk more in these terms, people would understand it. And, I get that when people see this, it's like, I got kids, I got a job,
Right.
But in the Valley area, having you serve jury duty is a lot more efficient. Okay. It's not like you're going to be sitting down at that courthouse for 2 weeks waiting to be called on a jury. They're much more efficient on scheduling cases. Each county has a little bit different system.
Yeah.
And that works for their county. So they understand the realities of modern life and being respectful of time. And we want people to serve. We need you to serve.
Yeah.
Because it's a jury of your peers, and that really means something. And like I said, it's an amazing thing. If you ever have the privilege to see that, it's amazing. All that said, I'm a reader, I'm a thinker, and that's why I gravitated to the appellate bench as opposed to the trial bench. Because over my years of practice, it seems that I wound up doing all the appeals.
Yeah.
So way back in the day when I first started practicing, especially in a legal community like the Trumbull, Mahoning, Columbiana thing, for somebody working in a small firm that had over the course of my 14 years as a lawyer before I became a judge, by my count, and it was all old paper dockets back then, I had at least 25 appeals.
Wow.
That's a lot. In addition to the other legal work that I did, that's a lot.
Wow.
That gets you, nowadays you could almost be considered an appellate specialist. And when I was an appellate judge, I served on the State Bar Appellate Practice Specialty Bar Certification Committee. So we crafted the bar exam, we evaluated the applications, and then decided whether somebody would be deemed an appellate specialist or not.
Wow.
And we've got other specialties like domestic. There's a lot of law specialties, so that's something I did over my years on the bench as far as experience.
Incredible.
So you asked why I'm going to the bench, why I want to go back to the bench. I have all this experience. And right now, the court is going through a transition period. 2 years ago, we lost a judge with decades of experience. The current office holder is stepping down this year. So there's years of judicial experience lost. And then in the 2026 cycle, the other two remaining colleagues that I had served with are going off the bench.
Oh, my.
If I do not win this race,
Oh, my.
the senior judge on that panel will have only been a judge, let alone on the Court of Appeals, for 4 years. Everybody else would be new. This court needs my appellate judicial experience to lead the next generation of judges on the court because we've lost all that experience.
Yeah.
Because I had been on the court for about almost 18 years when I left, and the current office holder, I forget how long he had been a judge, about 10 years. So, we lost a lot of experience, and many decades ago, the court had gone through a similar transition. And it's kind of a thing because it's different type of practice. You have to be familiar with all different kinds of law. So that's why it's so critical to have somebody can lead the next generation through this transition period as they develop their skills as an appellate judge and doing all that heavy reading and heavy writing and all the research.
Wow.
I tell people it's like you're writing law school exams and grading your own papers to boot. So it's, you have to really love to quietly think and write and collegially talk with the other judges on the panel to come to consensus. So that's why I'm going back.
All right. So can anybody who is voting vote in that, or does it have to be registered a certain party?
You have to be a registered Republican.
Okay.
If you live anywhere in Mahoning, Columbiana, Carroll, Harrison, Jefferson, Belmont, Monroe, and Noble. So I will be on Mahoning County's ballot countywide, Columbiana countywide, then going down to Jefferson and Carroll and Harrison and Belmont.
Okay. You're going to be on all their ballots.
On all their ballots.
Awesome.
March 19 in the Republican primary.
Before we say goodbye, I'm going to ask you the same question that I always ask everyone that I interview. So I'm kind of putting you on the spot because, guys, I did not prepare for this. But I like to always ask 3 of your favorite local places or places that you've discovered along your journeys that you love or look forward to eating or visiting, or hidden gems that you just feel like more people should know about that you would tell people. So love Poland Woods. Oh, yeah.
Love Mill Creek Park.
Oh, there you go.
And
you can't go wrong with Mill Creek Park. We definitely have a gem. And there's so much versatility. Like there's woods, and then there's lakes, and then there's wetlands. Very cool.
Okay, so, geez, do I pick?
I'm trying to give you time.
Do I pick a restaurant? I don't know what to do.
Yeah, go ahead and pick a restaurant. What's a good? What place do you enjoy going?
Again, we'd ride circuit, and that ride along the river is just great. So you find all these great restaurants down south.
I went. Speaking of that, and I'm going to talk and give you more time to think. But I was coming up from West Virginia, and I had to stop for gas, and I found this little restaurant, and I was like, I'm going to go in and go to the restroom. And I went in, there was a little lady there sitting there making homemade pies. And I was like, oh, I definitely have to get some pie. But I was like, who does, most of these places just order it nowadays, or they buy it frozen and thaw it. So yeah, some of these little places that you find in these on the little drives is
okay.
Cool.
I hate to say a restaurant because I'm just thinking of all these places. And you're talking about pies, so I'm thinking about this bakery.
Right.
This is where I go for my Italian stuff, and for cookies, and for bread, and for this kind of food and that kind of food. So I'm going to be a good spouse.
And
I'm going to say my favorite cigar store and lounge.
Oh, look at that.
Is Cigaro on Main Street in Hubbard, Ohio,
which
across the parking lot from Woodland Cellars. A little shout out to Nate Wilson. Yes, my husband and his partner Jamie Gurua are the primary owners, and they've got a great gang of guys. Steve Janchis, It's in Hubbard. So they sell cigars to the public. It's also a membership place. We talked earlier about conversation and civility and everything. So I don't smoke cigars. Can't figure it out, but it's pleasant to be around every once in a while when people are smoking. It's very pleasant.
Yeah.
The thing I like about Cigarro, because you go there. So
guys, okay, so
I'm going to do a little shout out to the Cigarro crew.
I love it because if you guys are listening or have listened, you know that we normally record at Cigarro, but today we are in Steve and Mary's home and not at Cigarro. So you guys already should be familiar with Cigarro. Go ahead.
The nice thing about that is it takes a long time to smoke a cigar. So it forces you to slow down, be in the moment, which is part of the undercurrents for like what we were talking earlier about.
Yes,
We're a nation of toddlers. We're too impatient and, we want everything now. It takes a while to smoke a cigar. So that forces you, like we used to, 20 years ago or more, slow down, be in the moment. And every time I've been there, everybody's mixing and mingling, talking, this one talking with that one. And people are talking about everything and nothing.
I get that's perfectly said. Yes.
And the even better thing is we've all seen it. I will say I have not done it, but we have been how many places gathering with our families out at a restaurant. And you look around and everybody's in their phones. Okay.
Wow.
At Cigarro,
It's not like that.
it is not like that.
You're absolutely. In fact, if I do have to do something on my phone, I feel like odd. Like I'm like
people
let me hurry
will
up and do this.
Right.
Yeah.
Or people are talking and somebody said, "Oh, hey, what year did It's a Wonderful Life come?" Or something.
Yeah.
Somebody will pick up their phone and like, "Oh," and you don't do it every time, but
Right.
Somebody looks it up, and then guess what happens?
They put the phone
The
down.
phone goes back down.
That's exactly,
and
yes.
Nobody looks at it. And circling back to another point that we were talking about earlier about civility and disagreeing without being disagreeable.
Yeah.
People that come to Cigarro have a wide variety of opinions and perspectives on life, on politics.
Yeah.
And I've sat around and listened to conversation and no one's been rude. No one's been ugly. No one's been personable. It's like the good old days where you'd sit around and talk about stuff.
Everybody knows your name.
Yes. I am not going to sing. You can be brave, Debbie, and sing.
No, that's the only line I know.
So, that's why I like to go there. That's why I think everybody likes to go there.
Listen, you said you were just going to shout out to be a good wife, but I am not convinced. That was a heartfelt, really great shout out.
So to wrap this up, my favorite cigar store and lounge is Cigarro in Main Street in Hubbard. That's Cigarro on Main Street in beautiful Hubbard, Ohio.
Man, now people are going to be requesting you more. Like, wait, that is so funny. No, but just to reiterate, I have learned about Formula One racing. I've learned about engineering. I've learned about how to pour bourbon over ice. I've learned, there are so many conversations that either I am having or I listen in and I hear, so much of. So Cigarro Cigar Lounge, definitely check that out. The OhioFlame.com, another gathering point. Bonfires, you got to have a good fire pit to keep that fire enclosed and be the talk of the town with some custom engravings of your favorite team or, initials, whatever you'd like. And then the Gallagher building downtown, you can find them on Facebook at The Gallagher. With that, do you have any closing
And the only
comments?
other thing, in addition to Cigarro, and vote for Mary DeGenaro for the 7th District Court of Appeals.
Yes.
Those fire pits
Yeah.
are beautiful. I've seen them. I've even tried to win a couple at events, and I have not been lucky. So a little shout out to one of my favorite people, Greg Smith. Because that's his company and his product line. And even in the summertime, there's nothing more cozy than sitting around a fire having a conversation.
Okay.
So speaking of my political life, and
Oh.
I want not to get choked up, but when I was a young whippersnapper and first on the political scene and first ran, Greg's father, Sonny Smith,
Yeah.
Mr. Boardman, Mr. Youngstown State, was the Republican Party chair. He was so supportive of me through, my long shot run way back in 2000.
Wow.
Such a great man. He was a guy that was so selfless. He and his wife, Rose, the whole family, so dedicated to the Valley, so dedicated to Boardman, so dedicated to Youngstown State. One of the greatest gifts Smitty ever gave me was he was on the library board forever. And I said, Smitty, I loved the library as a child, took my kids all the time. If there's ever an opening on the board, I want to serve on the Public Library of Youngstown.
Yeah.
And when there was an opening, Smitty vouched for me, and I got on that board, and I got to serve with Smitty on that board.
Wow.
I had to give it up when we temporarily moved to Columbus, so
Yeah.
I hope to go back again. But,
Wow.
that's how I got to know Greg, through his dad and now through Cigaro. And, one of my all-time favorite couples in the world, Rose and Sonny Smith.
Wow.
So
What a legacy.
yeah.
What a legacy.
So yeah, it's Christmas time. I'm running again. So feeling kind of sentimental. And so Smitty's one of the people that I've been thinking about.
Made you into, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I would, all the opportunities I've had to serve the public since that first chance back in 2000.
Wow.
And
Because he believed in you.
yeah.
Unbelievable. That's amazing.
And believed in the Valley.
Believed in, yeah.
And his
he was.
legacy lives on today.
I hear that similar things about, it's amazing. I always say, you guys, Youngstown Click, that you are the best part of what makes Youngstown Click. And you have the ability to do for somebody what Mr. Smith did for Mary, because you have exactly what somebody else needs. And so just like Mary said, he believed in the Valley, he believed in her. There's somebody waiting for you to believe in them. And so, as we always say in the click, we say it, I say it a lot, is definitely that you are the greatest resource this area has. So make sure that you head on out, wherever you're heading, wherever you're going, whatever you're doing today. Find that person that's waiting for you to believe in them, waiting for you to encourage them, waiting for you to invest some sort of time with them, because you may be that person that somebody needs to believe in them. And with
Make me cry.
And with that said, all right, guys, until next time, thank you for listening, and make sure you vote and do jury duty.
Yes, jury
And
duty.
Mary DeGenaro for 7th District Court of Appeals. I got that right?
Yep.
All right. All right, guys, talk to you later.